let's take a look at what's actually on this, because from a distance it can look quite intimidating. There's a lot of bits and bobs that go to it. So at the heart of this rig, you've got the Sony A7S3. The reason I chose this particular camera to film my wildlife stuff with is purely because of its capability and how versatile it is. I'm able to change from frame rates 25, 50 and 100 frames per second in relative ease. I don't necessarily have to go into the menu systems. I can use the custom functions, and I can do that in just a click of a button, which means that I'm able to quickly adapt to the scenario and the changing environment that we're working in. So from the camera, we move on to the lens setup. This lens here is a 150 to 600mm lens. It is a zoom lens, and it's a push-pull zoom lens because I can do that whilst wearing gloves. The only downside with it is that it is an external zoom, so the length of the camera will drastically increase. And in certain scenarios, like with high winds, which is what we found on Skoma, you'd find that just a simple increase like that can have a drastic effect on how the wind will affect your camera, and you get a lot more movement in the frame. So it is one of the drawbacks to this lens. Unfortunately, when you do zoom in and pull back, you are changing the balance point. So you do have to rebalance the rig. Now to counter that, I have a V-mount battery at the back here, which is how I power everything. And that gives me around 4 hours of battery life consistently, with the monitor and the camera itself being powered. And also occasionally I'll put a GoPro on here to be able to get behind the scenes shots. This V-mount I've got is on a hinge, so I can move this battery further back and counter the extension of the lens at the front, and that helps to balance it out. Again though, it does increase the size of the rig, so it's something I needed to consider whenever I'm going on a trip. Do I have room for that? If I'm in a hide, that could be a really difficult thing to do. In those scenarios, I do have a solution. Down here, I do have a secondary mounting point for the V-mount, and from here I would just run a USB-C cable up to power the actual rig. Okay, so next up we'll move over to the monitor. Now this is the Portkeys PT5 II. This particular monitor I use because it's a 5-inch monitor. It's not much bigger than a phone. It fits into the bag nice and neatly, and I can take it off, put it on when I need to. It also has the inbuilt ability to be able to have LUTs, which are lookup tables, which are used for color grading. Now there are a lot of features on this monitor that I do use, but the one that I find the most useful is the focus peaking, which draws a little red line around anything that's in focus in the frame, and it helps you to see exactly what it is that the camera's focusing on, which sometimes with a viewfinder or a smaller screen can be quite difficult. Also, having it mounted in this way on a magic arm means that I can tilt it, twist it, I can have it in whatever position I need it to be in, and then I can even flip it all the way up and have it laying flat so that I can see if I'm laying on the floor without having to put my head in the dirt, which is really useful, and I've used it a number of times. So on the side here I have a handle mounted, and that I initially put that in to protect the cable ports from any side impact. If the camera was to fall or I'm to grab it, because I can be quite clumsy, it was just there as a protection point for those cables. However, I found myself carrying it by this handle more than I'll carry it by the top handle, purely because I use that for cable management. And this handle here just seems to be a more comfortable place to hold the camera. And then when I'm carrying it, all the actual weight for the rig is being spread throughout all the caging system. It's not on the lens, it's not on the body, it's on the caging system. So one of the newest additions to the rig here is this particular microphone. Now in the video that you've got from Skoma, you'll see that I'm not actually using this particular microphone mount, and that is because although the Sennhiesser mics I've had great success with, I find the sound quality to be fantastic, I've now broken 2 mounting points. This is a Rode mount, which I found to be a little bit better. Again, it's plastic, but the mount point, the bit that actually screws to your camera, which gets all the impact, that's made of metal. And that's something, if you're looking at microphones, I would look out for that first, because I've spent, it's about 20, 30 pounds to replace this every time they break. So getting a metal mount point will save you an absolute ton of time and a ton of money and a ton of frustration. It is a directional shotgun microphone, which means that the cardioid pattern will aim for what's in front of it as opposed to what's on the side of it, and it will try and force out any sound coming from behind it. So you get a nice clean sound from whatever's in front of the camera and not so much on the sides of the camera, which is great if you're filming in crowds. Lastly is at the front here, I've got a lens support. Now using bigger lenses, especially when you're in a rig format like this, you really want to add some support to there, because you are carrying this rig around, you are moving this rig on the tripod, all of that weight of the lens is going directly to those contact points. So anything you can do to reduce the stress on the camera itself is well worth doing, and a lens support does exactly that.